title of the speech is Drop the Nuts. Drop the Nuts. Please welcome Edwin Tang.
Thank you, Mr. Tabletop, Mr. Toastmaster, fellow Toastmasters, most welcome guests. I have a friend who used to ask me every year to go on these extreme vacations with him. And I did several times. One year we went to the Amazon rainforest. We had an expedition. Another year we went hiking at Mount Everest. And I never knew anyone who was as excited and as enthusiastic about these travels as he was. It was really invigorating to be around him. The funny thing was, he would only be this excited and this happy for 2 weeks in every year. There was those 2 weeks where he was taking vacation to travel. The rest of the 50 weeks of the year, he was miserable. It was really depressing to be around him. And I couldn't figure out why. He had a beautiful wife that was the envy of every man. He had a stable job at a reputable company, which he had been at for many years, paid very well. He had a big house out in Long Island, and he had 2 kids in college. To me, he had a picture-perfect life. So I didn't understand why he was so miserable. But after I got to know him for a while, I figured out why. He hated his job. He hated it. Hated his job so much. But it was the only job he knew out of school, and it was the only job he ever had. And he had grown comfortable, and because he had stayed at that job for so long, he had got seniority, so he got promoted, got good benefits, it paid well. And I asked him, why don't you just quit the job? Well, he said, I can't. The job allows me to pay for the mortgages for my house, my college tuition for my 2 kids, and I need the money. And as a result of this, he had resigned himself to years of misery at this job that paid very well and was very, very comfortable. And this eventually led to his marriage kind of going downhill. I mean, on the outside, as an outsider, it looked like a happy family, a great couple, but the marriage was not doing too great. So this past year, he asked me to go again, and I couldn't go. But he told me all about it afterward. It had came down to 2 choices. Either bird watching in Australia or monkey trapping in the South African jungle. He chose monkey trapping in the South African jungle. Now there's a remote village in the South African jungle where there's a species of monkeys that are very clever, very cunning. And they would challenge the foreign tourists who would visit there to trap these monkeys. And if they could trap these monkeys, they would get these prizes from the local tribesmen. And it kind of grew to become somewhat of a tourist attraction. So how it works is the tribesmen would supply all the traps, all sorts of traps for the foreigners to try to trap the monkeys. And they would also supply the bait. And the bait they used were these sweet nuts. And the monkeys, they love these sweet nuts. They're crazy about these sweet nuts. So my friend decided to take on the challenge. He signed up for it, paid his money, and he started to lay out the traps for the monkeys, all sorts of traps. Now, these monkeys were so used to these visitors trying to trap them and they were so clever that they had long before figured out how to get the sweet nuts from the traps without setting off the trap. Now, but the thing is, they would pretend to be trapped in the trap. And then my friend saw them kind of, looking like they were trapped, so he would go to grab the monkey. And just as he's about to grab the monkey, at the last minute, the monkey would jump away and cause my friend to trigger the trap himself, and then he would get caught in his own trap. And the monkeys would be sitting up in the trees, laughing at him and eating the nuts. And this happened frequently. And my friend, just out of sheer frustration, out of many failed attempts, he finally gave up, and he asked the tribesmen, okay, you guys do it. How do you do it? Let me see you trap it. You're so smart. So the local tribesmen, they took out these big bottles, these big heavy glass bottles with long necks, and they put the nuts inside, and then they set it all over the jungle floor. As soon as the monkeys saw they smelled the nuts and they saw the nuts, they went to the bottles. They reached down with their hands to grab the nuts. Now the neck of the bottles were wide enough only for them to stick their arm in. But as soon as they grabbed the nuts, it was kind of a bit larger in the fist area, so they couldn't pull their arm out. And that's how they got trapped. And they wouldn't let go. They wouldn't let go of the nuts. And then the tribesmen would walk to the bottle, and the monkeys see them, and they would start screaming and yelling and kicking. And some of them, the bigger ones, would even try to start dragging the bottles along to try to run away. And then the tribesmen would just grab them. And as soon as my friend saw the monkey holding on to the nuts in the bottle, he saw himself. He saw his own life. He saw himself in the monkey. And he saw how he was in a very similar situation in his life. He was trapped too, because there was something he just would not let go of. And then he figured out later that what he didn't want to let go of was the financial comfort, the financial security that his job offered him. He just didn't want to move out of that. But he didn't realize that he didn't want to let go of that. And that's how he got trapped in his own life. And he saw this. So after the trip, he went back home. And the first thing he told me he did was he quit his job. He separated from his wife because it wasn't working out. He sold the house, set aside some of the money to pay for his kids' college tuition. And then the last time I met him, when I looked into his eyes for the first time in a long while, I saw a free man. It was like a huge burden was lifted from his shoulders. And later on, I learned that he went on to become a tour guide for some expedition in some small country in the islands. So the moral of the story is, a lot of people in life will complain about having problems, being miserable, being trapped, but they don't realize that they are trapping themselves because there's something they just don't want to let go of, and they don't know that they don't want to let go of it. And that's how many people trap themselves. So all you have to do is realize, wake up, and drop the nuts. Pacers Toastmasters.
Thank you.
And our final speaker was Edwin, told us a story about nuts, and he will be evaluated by Patrick Kramer. Patrick.
Fellow Toastmasters, welcome guests, especially Edwin. Edwin's story was a fable, a story with moral, a parable, if you will. But before we talk about the actual mechanics of Edwin's fable, let's just get a little housekeeping out of the way. I'd like to take 3 seconds to talk about everything that went wrong in Edwin's speech. Okay, actually Edwin did stumble a couple of times and did use a few space fillers, but it's nothing that a good teleprompter wouldn't cure. The truth is that Edwin's speaking style is very effective and very hypnotic. He kind of gets you into the ride, and it's very easy to listen to him speak. He speaks clearly, he speaks smoothly with a good rhythm and cadence, and he doesn't challenge you by assaulting you with conflagrations or massive barrages of big words. Instead, Edwin just gets you involved. He gets you raptured, and he gives the audience his whole attention. It doesn't matter where he's standing. He still talks to the whole room, which is quite impressive because most people will come to one side of the room and speak to that side of the room. Then they'll go to the other side of the room and speak to that side of the room. Edwin continues to focus his attention on the entire room even as he moves. Regarding the fable was absolutely fantabulous. I've got to say, he goes in right away with this very vivid character, this guy who does these crazy extreme things. He climbs Mount Everest. He does everything. This guy's hardcore, and this guy's unhappy. It's a character we can all relate to. And it's definitely a character that if we can't relate to, it's a character that we hope someone is if they look like their life is perfect. So he takes this character, and then he shows this character in one of his adventures. And he takes the guy through the adventure. And still, we don't know exactly what the moral of the story is. We assume it has something to do with his unhappiness. But mostly, we're having fun listening to the story. And then the twist happens. Talks about the bottle, the hand, and holding onto those sweet nuts, which definitely lends to some very prurient humor. But we'll disregard that. The Beavis and Butthead effect. And right in that instant, right when Edwin wants you to know what the moral of the story is, you know what the moral of the story is. It's that the man can't let go. So we go through this fun, exciting story, and we learn the lesson, and the lesson doesn't ease in, it doesn't sink in, and in his own very subtle, efficient way, Edwin hammers the point home without using a hammer. Straight right here.